This is the Philanthropy Show, connecting and inspiring philanthropy.
Well, you may know her as that lady with the red hat, or the writer of Beth's blog, or the author of the Network Nonprofit series. And we have a special surprise because Beth Kanter is now doing research for a new book using words like healthy, happy, replenishment, self-care, music to a nonprofit's ears. So we're here at the Alliance for Nonprofit Management's annual conference in Portland, Oregon, and Beth agreed to join us. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
Tell us a little bit. We were listening to your keynote and some of the interesting things that you've discovered with this whole process. We know nonprofits wear a lot of hats, but what is your goal with this book?
My goal is to find some of the bright spots that are actually practicing this at the organizational level and get the education out there, begin the education process.
Are people excited about the idea of change?
Oh, yes. From the reading I had this morning, it was amazing. Like, I was thinking about, like, is this even an idea? Should I even do it? But I've become very personally passionate about it because it's something that I discovered. And it's been so helpful for me and I've been writing about it, and I just said, well, this is the next book.
I think that I was watching the room as Beth was sharing her personal story, and if you wouldn't mind, share that here this afternoon, because it's something that I think people hear, but you made a good point. We keep doing the same that we're doing, overworking, not eating, no nutrition, no exercise, until
you go to your doctor and your cholesterol is 399, which is a recipe for killing yourself. And so I didn't want to take medicine, and my doctor said, well, why don't you try some diet and exercise? And my doctor had been saying that for a couple of years, and I didn't listen. And so I got a Fitbit, one of these, because what gets measured gets done. And I started walking. I walked 25,000 steps per day.
Wow.
And I started measuring my sleep. I started really watching what I was eating, and I went back, and my cholesterol went down to 99.
Congratulations.
But that's not all. Okay, what happened was I felt I was writing better, I was getting more stuff done, but I'm sleeping more and I'm spending less time in front of my computer. I'm out walking. And so I'm healthier, happier, and feeling really productive. And this got me on the whole idea of walking as part of work, movement as part of work, and really talking to a lot of nonprofits about it.
You're talking, though, about a fundamental change within the nonprofit sector's philosophy of how to get things done.
Absolutely, because I think the mindset, time management is a industrial age technique, and in a network society, we need to manage our energy and manage our attention.
Here's what struck me too while you were speaking. We have so many, I would say that every nonprofit would aim for this, but at least 90% that I've personally come across have the goal of telling their clients that they can make a difference, that they are worth the time needed to take care of themselves, to make that difference.
Absolutely.
But it's not reflected then in the people who are doing the work for those clients.
You mean the staff?
Yes.
Well, as I said, I've discovered one thing here today, is that there seems to be three types of CEOs, if that's what you're talking about, the leaders. There's those that don't believe self-care is important at all. There are those that, well, self-care is important and I'll make sure my staff is taking care of themselves, but I'm not going to take care of myself. And then there's those that walk the talk and talk the talk.
Well, I know the big question is, how do you do this shift? Do you have any inkling, or is that going to be par for the substance of the book that you're coming with? Well, how do we do it?
Well, some of the shifts that I've seen people make are like my own, where something calamitous happens, and then you realize it. But I hope that maybe through raising the discussion and raising the awareness, and maybe the peer influence, maybe people will begin to think about change.
Wow. So what is the process right now that you're going through with you're going out collecting research, you're asking folks to interview or to email you with stories?
Yeah, I mean, we have, like any book project, you have your outline, and we know the topics we're going to address. I now, from the design lab this afternoon, I'm going to go back and figure out what am we missing, I got some really great feedback about words to describe certain things, because I've been struggling with them myself. And then I have a co-author, and we'll go through the process of writing, which is so much fun.
Well, and we love what you do, and I teach classes at the Nonprofit Leadership Centers of 3 different regions in Florida, and I always say, you've got to go with Beth's blog, because you do not just social media, but fundraising, data, measurement, everything that tools and resources that nonprofits need. So if you don't know about Beth's blog, then you need to look for it. But also, we're so excited about your book. Thank you for all that you do for nonprofits.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much.
It was wonderful to meet you briefly. Good luck, and we'll see you later.
This show sponsored in part by
My Paper Pusher. Consider it done.
Follow the Philanthropy Show on Facebook for behind-the-scenes action, polls, and commentary.
Well, Jerry, thank you for taking the time to talk with us. Here we are in Clearwater, and you've come for a packed conference. I'm going to tell you, the people are leaving. There are smiles all over their faces.
Oh, great. Glad to hear it.
Obviously, love what you had. And
it was a wonderful group, by the way, and I've been coming to Tampa and Clearwater and St. Pete, and what a wonderful area. I enjoy it.
You have, what, for 3 or 4 decades now?
Yes, it's been 4 decades.
4 decades, 12-plus books. I'm not even...
Actually, they're 19.
19 books on fundraising, folks, yes. And Asking, I believe, has marked the history books, right?
Yes, Asking is the largest selling book in the history of fundraising. But I also wrote a book called Power Questions, and in 2014, that was Amazon's top 40 books. Wow. Yeah, so that's been rather special.
Well, it's quite an honor for us to be able to pick your brain, so to speak, on this. And thank you for everything you've done for the nonprofit sector. So fundraising today, you know, we've had the opportunity to talk with quite a few folks about their fear of fundraising. And I want to ask you, from all the experience and all the thousands of people you've had the opportunity to speak with, what's the number one obstacle that keeps getting in our way?
Yeah, for some reason, people have really trouble asking for the gift. Some say, I don't like to beg, and I say, it's not begging at all. You're asking people to join a great cause. Some say, I just can't do it. Even I've had life insurance salesmen, great people, great salespeople, but somehow asking for the gift. So that's why I like to go in pairs. I like to be able to orchestrate the ask. But if you're asking somebody to give to a great cause, it makes it so much easier.
Well, that is a part of, you know, within the nonprofit community, we have passions around what we're doing, right? We have passions around the change that we want in the community. But how do we continue to get stuck in that one area? Is it just the insecurity of, hey, Jerry, you know, I'm really passionate about this. I believe in it. What do you recommend for somebody to get around that when you said going in pairs?
Oh, I like going in pairs because you can orchestrate it. And what I like is to have the board member or the volunteer establish the appointment. If you get the appointment, you're 85% on your way to getting the gift. Getting the appointment is harder than getting the gift. Once you get the appointment, you're on your way. And so the board member can open doors, get the appointment. If you don't have that kind of a board, you have the wrong board. So getting the board member to make the appointment, get the gift, get the appointment, and then the two of you are together. I like to have the board member talk about why they love the institution, why it means a lot to them. They give testimony to why it's significant to them.
And they're not employed, they're volunteers.
And they're volunteers. And then the staff member can ask for the gift. And so going in pairs makes it so much easier.
You know, you're somebody who speaks after my heart. I've read some of your material, and when you talk about relationship versus the sale, explain a little bit about that. It's when you're asking for help in the nonprofit sector, it's really about you're asking for this relationship to continue forward.
Right. You know what? I've never felt it's like asking for a sale. You're asking somebody to join you in a great cause. And what you want to do is to talk about what are the results. How is your organization uniquely positioned to serve people? How are they changing lives and saving lives? I like to be able to say, no other organization does it as effectively as we do. So to be able to tell that story, I think if you probe and you listen and you ask questions, probe, ask questions, listen, you don't even have to ask for the gift. You listen the gift. Does that make sense?
It does, because you're becoming a partner with that person.
Exactly. And when you listen, you honor the person, you convince the person by listening, you compliment the person. So listening, and we talked about that at our session, listening is one of the most important tools in a fundraiser's toolkit.
Instead of thinking ahead to this is what I want to close them on.
Exactly.
Listening to their concerns.
Exactly. If you don't know what their concerns are, you're not going to get the gift. Give the donor more and more of what they want, and you will get more and more of what you want.
You know, I'm going to wrap this up with my third question is regarding just that, because I've also read that you've stated go into this relationship with no expectation of how the donor should act. In other words, I want to present this information to you, Jerry, and I want to hear how passionate I am and hear your passions about it. But then you still, as a fundraiser, how do you avoid wanting them to act?
Sure. The one thing, first of all, expect a no. You may get a no. And I say to our staff, SW, some will, some won't, so what, someone's waiting.
I love that. Wait, say that again.
Sure. Some will, some won't, so what, someone's waiting.
I love that. Especially the last four. So what, someone's waiting. Yes.
Someone's waiting to make a gift. So your job is to make the presentation, show as much passion as you possibly can, and finally ask a person to join you in the program. Don't talk about the organization. I say talk about who you serve and how you are uniquely positioned to serve men and women. You're changing lives and saving lives. That's what you want to talk about. It's not about money. It's not about the organization. It's about changing lives and saving lives. That's what it's about.
And Jerry, thank you for being so dedicated to just that, because by helping the nonprofit sector build its ability to do that, you're affecting change globally. You're giving people these tools to do it on their own and really strengthening them. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, it's great being with you. Thank you.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much, Jerry Panas.
This show sponsored in part by
Our studio sponsor, the Nonprofit Leadership Center of Tampa Bay.
Follow the Philanthropy Show on Facebook for behind-the-scenes action, polls, and commentary.
Hi, I'm Emily Benham, CEO of the Nonprofit Leadership Center, studio sponsor for the Philanthropy Show. Does your organization have a monthly newsletter that goes out 8, 10 times a year? I know that many do. My advice to you today, delay no longer. Make it a priority and keep it simple. Did you know that research shows that after a donor makes a gift, performance matters 20%, while exposure matters 65%? What does that mean? It means that we need to find creative ways to stay in front of them with news about our organizations and stories about the people we serve. I do a monthly email update for our board, focusing on 2 primary areas. First, our top goals and our progress to date. Secondly, I like to find an unusual story or dimension of our work and tell them about it in a personal way. A story of a student, a photo of a special thank you card, a list of all the nonprofits using our center in a 30-day period, things that they wouldn't necessarily know unless they worked here. I try to keep it to 2 pages or less and include at least one photo. I've gotten great feedback. Then I asked our major donors and former trustees if they would like to receive the same information. And guess what? They said yes. It's simple, timely, and effective. I hope that you put it at the top of your to-dos today. Thank you.
And here we are with Susan Meier, Senior Governance Consultant with BoardSource and Principal of Meier & Associates, and she's taken the time after a full day of working with lots of board members from throughout Tampa Bay, giving lots of encouraging ideas, to come and talk with us on the Philanthropy Show. Thank you and welcome.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
Well, this is an interesting time to be talking about boards and board roles and board leadership, so I'm kind of going to go a little bit basic because, you know, the viewers that we have watching across the country, there might be new board members, there might be very experienced board members. But first, what is the primary role of a board member?
Well, it's a great question. The board itself has three fundamental roles, and that is to set direction, provide resources, all kinds of resources, human and financial, and reputational, and then, of course, to provide appropriate oversight of the operations. But the board member, him or herself, actually has three legal duties: the duty of care, loyalty, and obedience. Very important. Many board members don't realize that. And they also have responsibility to actively participate in the board, come to meetings prepared, ask the great questions, be 24/7 advocates and ambassadors for the organization. So there are many responsibilities of the individual board member as well.
You know, you didn't take very long to say that, and yet I understand a lot of what she just said. That would be huge prep help for board members who are coming on. So what are the most, I guess, commonly misunderstood or least expected things that board members who don't really, they're first-time board members, and all of a sudden they come on and they go, I didn't know I was supposed to do that.
Yeah, it's really a great point, and it happens time and time again. What we usually suggest is that every potential board member have some level of understanding about what will be expected of them. What does it mean to sit on this particular board of directors? How many meetings a year do you have? What kind of check am I to write? What are my legal duties? Except, you know, how many committees am I to sit on? These kinds of things. But preparing new board members for really serving effectively, it takes time and intention. And what we see happen more and more now are very, you know, more formal, very intentional orientation sessions. Mm-hmm. And I think it's helpful to have a board mentor for each new board member as well.
That's a great idea.
I can work with them and kind of answer some of those questions that you might not want to ask at the full board table as you get to know the culture and the practices of the board itself.
And hopefully not a new board member with a new board member, somebody who's been on a little bit longer.
Exactly. Seasoned board member with a newbie. That's always what I like to see.
You know, I think that what people are familiar with the onboarding process, they put everything that you just talked about once the board member is already on board. Mm-hmm. But you're saying do some of this ahead of time.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you have to be careful because once they have to be elected first. Mm-hmm. The board member must be elected, and then you can begin to prepare them, give them materials to study in advance, connect them with their mentor perhaps, and prepare them for that first board meeting. It still takes some time to assimilate, but we really invite, hopefully, the best and the brightest to sit at our board tables, so we want them to be engaged and to actively participate as quickly as they can.
And you know, in the decision to become a board member is a big one, and we understand that because you are an employed, probably member of the community doing a full-time job somewhere else, and you're coming on as a volunteer to help the nonprofit that you're passionate about. How do you walk the guideline between how many hours is appropriate, how many hours is not? Is there a set standard? How many do you have on the board? How do you, I guess, equally distribute the workload of the board?
It's a really good question and not always easy to do. Typically, board officers will expend more time in board service. That just makes sense. They have additional responsibilities and so on. The typical board member should expect to certainly attend board meetings, so it depends, is it a monthly board meeting or every other month or quarterly? How long is the board meeting? Is it an hour and a half or is it 3 hours? So you need to kind of work the math out in advance to understand what that basic time commitment will be. And beyond that, we really are looking for board members to volunteer to be engaged in special events or maybe in some volunteer activities as well. So a great question for prospective board members to ask in advance is, what can I expect reasonably in terms of how many hours a month I would need to spend? Now, the officers then is, right, as the officers are working with the board and taking on the work, they need to think about how do we divide this up appropriately between different committees or different leaders on the board as appropriate, so that the work can in fact be shared by all the board members.
We're talking a lot about a lot of work that board members do, but there's also that governance angle, and there's the catchphrase. We kind of hear it in the community: is it a working board or is it a governance board? So, can't they be both, and what's the difference?
I talk about with frequency. So often with good intention, we talk about, we have a working board. And what I think we generally mean is our board works. Well, a working board actually implies that the board itself is doing the work of the operations as well as the work of governing.
As if they are fulfilling a staff duty?
Yes, and typically it's appropriate at the very early start of let's say a startup organization where there may be no staff or perhaps volunteer staff or maybe one part-time staff. And so then board members actually do need to do much of the work of the operations.
So it's not that they don't have any lazy board members and they're all working. I can say that. But it's that they're actually trying to develop the organization from an inertia, from an initial standpoint, and then they grow into the governance because the staff are in place?
Yes. Well, they always have the responsibility of being a governing board, even from the very beginning, because boards govern. That's why they exist. But as the organization matures and moves from the startup to the adolescent phase to the mature phase, the role of the board actually changes. And at the beginning, as we said, it's more hands-on, and it is involved in operations, helping with the finances and bookkeeping. It might be helping to run programs.
Finding the right executive director or CEO.
Exactly, these kinds of things. And then as the organization grows and you hire staff, competent staff, the board steps back from that hands-on role and becomes more of just the governing board and gets more involved in oversight, fundraising, being a great ambassador, providing oversight, and so on.
What is your passion around boards? Expert here, done this for a long time, and you're very good at it and know a lot about it. Where does that come from?
I didn't even know this existed when I was growing up, but as soon as I was exposed to the nonprofit sector and began working with these incredible volunteers that are so passionate about the organizations, I realized how important this was to me. I personally really believe the boards matter. I don't know that everybody agrees, but I believe it. I think they should matter. They all aren't reaching their potential at this point, so many of us are just trying to do what we can to help them reach that potential.
Let me ask you this one last question, because I know that we do hear a lot about it a little bit. Let me get you to come towards me just a little, so we're both on camera here. We just lost and got a light back on again. This is what happens when you're live in the field. So it's wonderful. It's fresh. What do you see as a healthy relationship between a CEO and the board? What does that look like?
It's changed a lot. When we used to think about this relationship, it was much more hierarchical, with the board up here and the chief executive down here. The chief executive serves at the pleasure of the board, but actually BoardSource has coined the term constructive partnership to describe it. And what I love about the idea of a constructive partnership is it essentially says that the success of the board and the success of the chief executive are interdependent on one another. And that means we need to understand our own respective roles and respect them. So the board doesn't get into the staff business and operations, and the staff doesn't try to govern the institution.
That can be very tempting. It can be very tempting.
It's very easy to slide down that slippery slope if we don't understand what we're doing. But we need to work together, though. We need to work together on strategy. We need to work together on board meeting agendas. We need to work together on fundraising, being ambassadors. There's so many things we need to do together, but we have to respect we have different lenses and different responsibilities in those areas. So what's most important in that relationship, quite frankly, it's building trust. And not blind trust, but earning the trust and finding a way to have the hard conversations, ask the tough questions, really address the big issues, because our missions matter. We can't afford not to, and we each should be doing it. Both the chief executive and staff and the board leaders should all be doing this kind of work together.
Then they're a team.
Yes.
They're a unit in
Absolutely.
that. Yeah,
That's a
I
great way
know.
of saying it.
I love that. Thank you for what you do within the community. We end every show with a special segment that we call Truth or Care.
Oh.
And it's an easy one. It is,
Okay.
what is your heart's definition of philanthropy? In other words, why do you do what you do? What drives you towards this, and why do you have this passion? We talked a little bit about it a few minutes ago, but what's behind the passion that you have in working within the nonprofit community?
You know, I think it really comes down to my wanting to help others be the best they can be on behalf of something bigger than all of us. And I can't do all the work myself, but if I try to help boards and chief executives, groups at a time, then they can go off and do the really good work that needs to be done. And that's very rewarding work for me.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much for
for
the
joining
opportunity.
us.
Absolutely.
Susan Meier. And that wraps up another edition of The Philanthropy Show. So be sure to go to thephilanthropyshow.com. Check out the past shows tab in case you missed anything else. We've got a couple of other shows on board governance as well. We are here to be a resource for you. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Monday.
Do you have an idea for the Philanthropy Show? Contact us via our website or email us at tps@myvideovoice.com.